Welcome back to All Access Fest. I hope you enjoyed the break and got to network and explore the platform. Before we get started, once again, I do want to remind you about the chat and Q&A feature to the right of the screen. This is where you can talk with other people, introduce yourself, and also where we'll pull questions for the Q&A at the end of the panel. But with that, I would like to introduce our next session, Buildings by Sarah Harrison, who is a DJ and broadcast media producer.
Thank you so much, Shania. It's a pleasure to be here today, especially alongside these wonderful panelists, and really excited to be talking about this subject today, building sound futures. We are talking all about production and engineering jobs. So, we've got some hopefuls and students here in the chat and in the audience. Music creation is a huge industry, and there are a lot of opportunities here to make money, because ultimately that's what we want to do, make money from our passion, which is what I've been able to do as a DJ and broadcaster, is take a passion, practice it, and turn it into my purpose. So we're going to start with some introductions. We've got alongside me here, Minji Will. She is the internship program manager and studio engineer for Women's Audio Mission, training 30 interns a year, giving them hands-on training in the studio, providing professional development opportunities, industry connections. And Minji herself also works in the studio as a recording engineer, recording voiceovers, podcasts, and more. Over to my other side, Whitney Tabor, Director of Partnerships and Business Development at Girls Make Beats. This is an organization that creates and nurtures music, tech, and education opportunities to help further expand the presence of female music creatives. Whitney is also the former VP at LA's infamous Record Plant, so she knows her way very well around a recording studio. And to the bottom of me, Jay Rich. He is an audio engineer, entrepreneur, dot connector, and a brand himself. He's worked alongside the greats such as Offset, Drake, Trippie Redd, Kodak Black, City Girls. I mean, the credits roll on forever and ever. And then James Fauntleroy, definitely last but not least, who is currently topping the charts, actually, with a huge single, Die With A Smile. James is a singer, songwriter, and also producer himself. He's known for his massive contributions across all genres. I mean, R&B, pop, and hip hop, you name it. Fauntleroy is your guy. He's worked with so many prominent artists and been involved with writing and producing. I mean, super hits, super hits. We've got a massively talented room here. I hope I've done your intros justice, everyone. So look, I want to get straight to it, and I actually want to get down to the basics, right? I want to hear it from you guys, the distinctions actually between the two, between production and engineering, right? But also the nuances of the two. How isolated are they and how connected are they? I think I want to start and direct this question to either James or Jay Rich, as you are both very much on the creative side of it.
Well, I can say a little something like, but mostly because I was an engineer first. Like that was my first job in the business. That was my first like way to get access to the studio. Is like I started off at my house, just pressing all the buttons in Pro Tools, breaking someone's laptop. But I didn't have a laptop at the time. And I met my first like big writer as an engineer. Her name was Makiba Riddick. You guys should Google her. She's really popping. And I'd say, as far as the answer to that question, engineering and production are, as far as how those terms are defined today, are almost the same thing. Like the engineering is honestly, from my perspective, even more important than the production aspect in terms of like a beat, like making a beat. The creativity it takes to make the beat and write the song are super important, but like a good or bad mix can make a world of difference between your song getting placed, your song getting just enjoyed, your song being streamed radio. So like I'd say that, when we say production now, because I think of production in terms of the old definition of producing, but when we say production now, which is beat making, a producer that doesn't understand frequencies and all the things the engineer needs to know is more than likely going to have a tough time finding success unless they're lucky enough to get with Jay Rich or somebody that really knows what they're doing. And that just is such an important part of the equation.
Yeah. Um, I can chime in. So pretty much the question was, what's the relationship between the two?
Yeah, and the distinctions, but also the nuances.
I think to me, I think it's kind of like right now. I think what it started to be is like producers were normally with the artists and creating the songs with the artists, all the way through in person. And I think the game is kind of changing to where engineers are now in the studio with the artists mainly. But I do feel like it's like a great relationship between the two. Like you'll find out where some producers can actually arrange and mix their beats a lot better than the engineer, or some some engineers also bring out the best in working with some producers. It's kind of like just like it's just, I think there's so much more that you can do, and there's so much more that exactly so much more you can do with new technology, that it's a little different, but it's just a great collaborative effort. And I'm just liking, the new respect that engineers have been getting, that has been making it a little easier to make it more collaborative and more ideas get heard from the engineers these days. But um, I think it's just a whole collaborative process. I guess the nuances, I guess, sometimes can happen, like when an engineer mixes a beat or arranges a beat that a producer isn't, really keen to or really like. It's kind of hard to kind of have a collaborative effort between an artist, producer, and an engineer when all three aren't always in the session. So I think that's kind of like the whack part about it. Uh, but other than that, I love it. And like James said, it could kind of be hard to make a hit record if your engineer is trash.
Yeah, Jay Rich, were you just referring to when the producer be walking out of the room for the rest of the session?
Or when they just send it, or like, and the tempo is like 130.26. And it's like I don't have any context on how to fly this hook directly on beat, with you not sending it to me. Or yeah, I've seen, a couple different tunes being used in a beat because of different things producers do. And it's just, I just miss the old days where everybody was in there together from start to finish. I think if that was how it was now, I think crazier records will get done. I think the pressure back in the day too, with having to record the whole thing to write the straight through. That was a crazy way to record music back in the day. Now I think we're kind of lazy. That's why everybody feels like they freestyling when they're just not writing things down. But it's just a little different. But other than that, it is quicker. It's easier to connect with people internationally. So I love the way that the scene is going.
I was
I
gonna
love
chime.
yeah, go on, Whitney, go on.
I was gonna chime in too when it comes to, I produce as well. I produce, and I actually just tracked my first session as an engineer, so I'm pretty proud of myself. After 15 years of being in a studio. But when it comes to educating the girls, from my perspective, is the more you know a lot about everything, it's better for you to communicate. So for music, in my eyes, it's a language. So if I can't speak a little engineer and I can't speak a little producer, how am I going to convey what I really want my music to sound like to others? So when it comes to teaching the girls, that's why we want to make sure that, hey, even though you're not really wanting to be a producer, know a little bit about production, know the lingo, know the language, so then you can communicate your art to the person who's gonna, like James said. I used to tell my runners and the people at the studio and some of my artists who were a little, particular, I'm like, don't be mean to the engineer, because that's actually the most important person in the room, because they're going to be the one to make it sound good or bad. So for myself, I think it's more so knowing a little bit about everything will make sure that your art is actually, dictated and put out the way that you want it.
Whitney, and it lends itself to something that I wanted to bring up, um, maybe later down the line, but I think we should stick on this topic very quickly. I saw a tweet that ATL Jacob put out, actually, regards to how, for instance, Future hasn't been sort of, you know, he takes criticism. He said something like he's managed to stay at the top of his game because he takes criticism and guidance from his producers. So I would like you guys to speak to that, right? How important your role is in an artist's career, because more often than not, we think, oh, the producer and the engineer caters to the artist, but I think there's the opposite happening, and how important that is to the artist's career. Can you speak more on that?
I think I'll go ahead. I think it's a art. Um, James is hilarious. I think it's an art because it's almost like, especially if you get into a situation where this artist has had a #1 hit without you. This artist has already gone platinum without you. You might be an engineer and they might have a lot more accolades than you. You know, so it's almost like being in the middle of like willing to learn, but also, if you hear something wrong or you hear something, not being a yes man, being sure enough in yourself to speak on your beliefs, but also have some ground to stand on. Don't just say you don't like it because someone said the whole room says they like it. Have some ground to stand on, and also it's all about delivery. If he plays this one song for you and it's like, how do you think about this? I recorded this without you, and you're like, it's trash. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You might want to say, I like the verse, or I like this part, or I really like the beat, or like, try to find out things you like in the record before you just start criticizing, because there might be, it's a way to kind of get into things. But definitely what I found is artists don't like yes men, to be honest. They like people who know how to communicate to their thoughts to make a record sound better, and etc. So that's what I've learned.
I can jump. I can
I
jump.
really like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can jump into from, I mean, years of being at Record Plant and seeing long-term engineers, and a lot of the things. Like I said, I love James telling his story about starting as an engineer. 90% of my staff went from engineer. Well, they went from runner to engineer to this to this to this, but now they're vocal producers, they're producers. That's really where they ended up and can actually now enjoy really where they wanted to create from the beginning. So it's a great entry point. But the thing about having, I guess, couth, or being a little bit more, demure, as the kids say, right? With the way you're gonna say it's not that great, has a huge. I have a story. I'm not gonna use too many names, but I'll say Kid Cudi's engineer for like so many years, right? Was one of my guys. And so, to the point where their family going on vacations, and they asked him, hey, one day, how do you like this? And thinking that we're such buddies, we've been through this, through the trenches, he said very bluntly, I'm not going to say it on this cute little panel, but he said it in a way that he didn't like what he was saying, and he didn't have a job the next day. So again, it's very much like 10 years of being that man's engineer. You might have caught him on that one day, my boy. So you got to, and at the end of the day, artists are people too, is what I'd always have to remind my staff. So again, remember that you can be as close to that person as you think. You can create together. You can have many more accolades than them, or this and the third. But again, they might be going through something. There might be not be the best day for you to be as, open and honest. But definitely, yeah, remember that that is still your job and that is still your boss. So, be real, but maybe not too real, yeah.
I love the transparency of this because, we can focus on the music skills all day and all our lives, but really and truly, when it comes down to the music business, and especially when you're in such close proximity with artists, it is more so people skills and psychology skills that you need to have on lock. And that does take a lot of skin in the game. You're not gonna automatically have that. I think the more seasoned you are and the more rooms you've been in, the more you're gonna have those skills under lock. I see, Minji, that you've agreed with you've been nodding to a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna turn to you here because there's a lot of different starting points and entry points into music creation, right? Into production and engineering, and you specifically work at the education stage of it. So can you speak a bit more on the journey of going from passion to practice? So someone knowing that they have a passion for this, but how do they turn that into practice and then profession?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I love what Whitney and Jay Rich said so much about being able to deliver it in the right way. Because I do think in engineering and production, like it's truly a customer service job. The way that you interact with people, your presentation, it's about taking care of the artist, taking care of the people that you work with. So how you present yourself, how you interact with people is gonna matter so much. I hear people say time and time again, like, technical skills are teachable. You can learn the technical skills, and they would rather work with someone who has a good personality, who has a good vibe, who's willing to learn, and build those technical skills. So yeah, I started as an intern in the recording studio I worked at in Chicago. I didn't have great technical skills. I was in school and I started like on GarageBand, but I was really willing to just be there, help out in any way I can. And then I worked my way up from there. So I feel like if you have a passion for it and you're willing to dedicate yourself to learning your craft as an artist, whatever way you want to, it doesn't have to be jumping in like into all the super technical things right away. I started learning on GarageBand. You can start wherever you're at in terms of production, and then putting yourself in situations where you can be helpful to people. I feel like that's how people really grow in this industry.
I agree. I agree. I've been in a lot of situations where, just because I know how to cater to an artist, and I focused on, a lot of things that I knew that the artist liked, making sure the snacks they like were in the session, or just making sure I was there earlier, making sure I could be a fly on the wall. Sometimes people talk their ways right out the room, knowing how to have good energy, how to be positive. There's been a lot of situations where I actually didn't go to school for engineering until I already had a record that was 5 times platinum. Then I went to school. I was able to get into certain doors just by being a good person, having a good vibe, being on time, and just trying my hardest. And I think that's very important.
I love that you mentioned that, Jay. It's just very non-linear entry to being a producer and engineer, and the education side of it can sometimes be, quote unquote, institutionalized. But we know, Whitney here, you work alongside some budding producers and engineers, specifically girls, and I'd love to hear your experiences with what sort of spark do you see in girls that walk through the door at Girls Make Beats, and what kind of like initial inquiries do you get? How do you get these girls knocking on your door and wanting to be a producer? What kind of stories do you hear?
Wow. Well, I think it's honestly, well, coming from actually, became a part of Girls Make Beats from giving the organization a tour at Record Plant. And I didn't even realize it was an issue that there wasn't many girls until I stopped and was like, I've been in this building for 10 years and I'm the only girl. Like, I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And so for me, I think a lot of women women and young girls don't see themselves in these roles. These are not traditional you know, you're not going to go down the aisle of the Toys R Us and there's an engineer doll or an engineer, you know, board for the kids. So again, that's literally how soon kids get interested in whatever it is that they're going to probably want to pursue creatively and or intellectually. A lot of stories are, you know, the same old. Those aren't jobs. I mean, I've literally heard 8-year-olds say the world, and this is actually kind of where my spark for now completely taking myself out of the professional industry and really diving into the education and making sure more girls have education and opportunity to be able to be a part of, you know, the things that they want to learn about, was for the simple fact I would interview an 8-year-old saying, well, why do you think young girls don't try to be engineers or producers? And they say the world doesn't want us to be that. The world doesn't allow us. And I, at first, you know, I think most people think it's a men against women, and that's not the case. It's not they're scared of the guys or this or that. We for sure don't make that a thing here. It's really more so the world. And when I kept hearing that the world doesn't give these girls opportunities, the world doesn't allow women, I took offense to it, because I'm like, well, we're the ones creating this world that little kids and little girls like me, I came from a reservation. I didn't know a person or a soul when I moved to LA, and I worked for, my first job was working for Rihanna's creative director. If you asked me what a creative director did, I wouldn't tell you. I don't know, but I got the job and I did it. Like, still here and did all of the things I've done without an ounce of education or, you know, anybody showing me the way. It was just more so, let's just figure it out. So again, for myself, seeing young girls in these huge cities like Los Angeles with all the access and all the, you know, you could go find anybody to teach you or mentor you or whatever, to see that they just didn't have the spark and or confidence to just go after what they wanted, really like pissed me off, lack of better word. Like, I was just like, nah, man, like, we have to actually show them. So seeing Minji, seeing, you know, more women, Sarah, yourself, even in the DJ spaces, they have to see it to dream to be it. So again, us women being louder and bolder about saying, oh yeah, by the way, I produce, I DJ, I engineer, I vocal produce, I creative direct, I put curriculums for schools together, you know, say all of the things. So then the little girls in this chat, so the women in the chats, for the grown ladies, for the dudes even, can be inspired to say, oh yeah, if she can do it and she came from a town of 1,200 people, then why can't I? And then give them somewhere to go. You feel me? Like, don't just be like, hey, I've done all these cool things. Good luck, kids. Like, nah, like, give them and mentor them somewhere to be like, hey, try this, but don't do it all for them. But I think I answered your questions there. Bro, you know, I'm gonna go start running.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, it's about um it's about taking a passion and not being so sort of just being so focused, you know, rather than being clouded by all of the judgments around you. And actually that kind of lends itself a bit to a question or even a comment I see in the chat. Charlie here says, appreciates our perspectives. Personally, I'd love to open more doors and create a more welcoming and understanding space for neurodiverse artists and engineers. I think that's a very, very valid comment here. Minji, do you have anything? I feel like you have something to say. I can see you nodding. I don't think you guys can see me, by the way. We have some technical issues probably with my camera. But
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I totally agree. I think that there needs to be way more of a welcoming space for artists of all types, and especially neurodivergent artists or artists with disabilities. And I love, love, love what Whitney said about building confidence, because I feel like having confidence, being assured in yourself, is such an important skill set for someone who is a producer or an engineer, because you're going to be working with so many people. You have to be able to hear someone say, I don't like what you just did, or I want you to do it this way, and be able to kind of pivot and not like let that shatter you. So something that I work on a lot with young professionals or interns and myself is building your confidence, building your sense of self so that you can stand in a room of like 15 people who have amazing accolades, and can be confident in who you are. But in terms of building spaces that are more inclusive, I mean, I think at Women's Audio Mission, it's just the way that we do it is just by providing spaces for that. So a lot of our interns are neurodivergent too. So having a space where it's very clear that everyone is able to be exactly who you are, and whatever learning needs or whatever needs that you have is welcome, I think is a great way to start that. And then by the communities that we build in these spaces that are kind of like affinity spaces, and then bringing those into other spaces, it kind of branches out and hopefully create some change in the industry.
Great, thank you. Right, I want to switch to a bit more technical talk now. I want to talk about maybe what some underrated tools are that the audience should be experimenting with right now in their early stages of learning the craft. Maybe, James, you can tell us all the secrets to getting those number ones.
Wait, what? That's
What secret tools do you have? Those underrated tools that you're using?
You mean like
Spill it all. Spill the
you mean
beans.
plugins, or you mean like social skills?
No, we're talking technical now. Technical music, plugins, doors, anything that makes a sound.
Like, even though I'm more interested in modern techniques, like and even like newer plugins, like I forget who makes Supermassive. What's the name of that plugin company?
Valhalla.
Exactly. Everybody loves Valhalla plugins right now. Like I'm seeing that in every session I'm going into. But like with Bruno, for instance, that's my interest and preference. Also, because I'm a huge nerd, so I literally was watching a video about decibels last night because I just like that. But which I was like, what bells? I didn't even know that was a thing. Anyway, another conversation. But with Bruno, who I've worked with the most over the last like 7-8 years, he's very, very interested in old workflows and vocal chains and old equipment, old keyboards, just everything old. It's just a museum inside of the studio over there. And so like also I work with a bunch of other people, and I think he's probably the only one I know that has a full old school setup. I work sometimes with Stax Academy in Memphis, and at the Stax Museum, they have this really interesting area where they show all these just old studio setups and like drum snares with a wallet on it to control the sound, like because they have like drum tape and drum gel and all these different kind of things you put on there. But back in the day, they were just throwing their wallet on top of that thing. And so I'd say like, wow, there's such a fun like bunch of software and everything to get lost into. So as far as DAWs, most of the people I know use Ableton, and I consider myself an Ableton guy. D-Mal, who is Bruno's main producer, he uses Logic, and I haven't been able to convert his religion over these last couple years. I'm trying hard though, and then, but I remember when I first started working with Timbaland, he was using Cubase. You know what I mean? Like exactly. I made that same face Jay Rich just made when I would look at his setup and see, he had the ASR 10 and the Cubase in the 2000s. So I was just mind blown. And so I think what I picked up from seeing all these different tools being used, while there are certain ones that I do like, and then I don't know, maybe some engineering plugins I'll grab because I know the people, you know what I'm saying? So like I'll just be putting Pensado plugins on stuff because that's my hobby. But and also like really popular are like SSL plugins. That's something that's really important. Jay Rich could give you guys a better like rundown of a technical list of plugins, but what I would offer from my experience with number ones and things is that what I noticed is way more important than the DAW or the plugin is the understanding of what those things are doing and why. You know what I mean? Like I remember there are plugins that can do all these old techniques, but I remember when I got back from Memphis and I was looking around at Bruno's live room setup, and I realized, oh yeah, I see somebody mention Pro Tools. That's what we all doing out here in the big leagues. We're doing Pro Tools. But I remember seeing his live setup, like emulating a setup from the 50s or the 60s, as far as like making amp closets, isolating a bunch of amps together, like just doing all these old techniques to do what a lot of these plugins do. So I'd say, yeah, you should definitely get your notepad out as Jerry starts telling y'all what plugins you need to use. But you need to understand what they're doing and why, so you can get the value out of those things.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, I've also been answering questions in the Q&A. I've seen a couple in here, so keep them coming. I've been answering a few questions in here. But as far as me, I will say, yeah, the DAW of choice lately for engineers has been Pro Tools, but you have to be able to dip and dabble. I've had to work Logic on the fly. I've had to work Cubase on the fly. I've had to figure out Ableton on the fly. If there's an artist and he needs to record, I'm not giving up my credit because I don't know how to work something. I've recorded people in Fruity Loops before. Um, like whatever needs to be get done, I'm gonna figure it out. So yeah, my
Funny, I was just typing in here like T-Pain made hits in GarageBand, like 20, like 10, 15 hits GarageBand.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm the type of man that's like, oh, that sounds like a hit in GarageBand. Let me see your computer. Let me get this credit so I can put my name on it too. But also, yeah, Reason. I know how to use Reason. I've used yes, a guy done said, "Hey man, I done recorded voice notes on my phone. Can you record mix? Yes, pay me. Yes, I can do it all." But as far as plugins, Wave plugins is always the standard. That's what everybody is talking to. One of my tricky that I like, that's kind of basic that everybody kind of has, is that Air bundle. I really like Air Dynamic Delay. That's something that everybody can have. And to be honest, I like Fab Filter a lot. Uh, I like to put a good L2 on my master bus. I like Pro Q a lot, Pro Q3 a lot. Yeah, I know we're getting kind of low on time, so
No, that was money right there. He was just giving y'all free money.
Well, moral of the story is learn it all and never stop building your toolbox, right? And Whitney, we spoke about this a bit, how to get an attention of a recording studio when it comes to the hiring process. If someone's looking for an entry point into a recording studio, right, and have a traditional salary job, is that something that still exists in this day?
Well, uh, a lot of these bigger studios, like Jay and James were just saying, you can record literally in a closet full of amps, or you can record in your car at your mama's house. Like, it really is, with the way that technology is moving. Larger studios are not really, sticking around, but again, they are still there. When it came to my hiring process, when I was at the record plant, more so it was the personality. Again, I was told before I even, again, by the way, I was hired, I had no idea what I was like. Oh, when I worked for Rihanna, I visited record plant once. I was like, oh, it's a vibe here, cool. When I left Rihanna, I was like, I should see if I could get a job at that studio, but I don't want to be an engineer, I don't want to be a producer, I don't want to be a singer, I don't want to do anything. I just really love music. Fro asked once, he was like, what are you? And I was like, I'm just Whitney and I like music. And that's how I got my job. But again, I remember people literally telling me they're never gonna hire you. You're this, you're that. I'm like, whoa, bro, it's giving projection. Relax. I was like, I'm not gonna let any of that bother me. So I went, threw my resume in there, and got hired on the spot. But it was more so for the fact I was myself. So I think going in there not being too, worried about, oh, I have all of these tech skills. And then when I became, when I went from like there was a song, the bottom to the top, I went, when I became the hiring manager and VP, I would look at your resumes. I'm just going to be 1000%. I would look at the resumes. If you already came from a different studio, I probably would look for somebody else who had zero studio experience, because every studio is going to teach you differently how it works at this studio. Like I said, people recorded at, Glenwood, or they want to record at Chalice, or they want to record at Henson or Westlake or Record Plant. Every artist has a reason that has nothing to do with the tech stuff. That's why they liked working there. I had artists that would come with, the second you leave, we're never coming back. I'm like, don't tell me that. Like, that's crazy, but okay. But again, that it really, there's not a perfect resume or a perfect anything that's going to guarantee you get a job. Just like the fellas were saying, make sure you're prepared with your knowledge. Like for myself, knowledge is power. The more you know a little bit about a lot is going to be how you add more value to the room. So again, for myself, I'm really good at networking. I know a lot of people somehow, and a lot of people know me. That is honestly why I really rose to the ranks very, very fast at Record Plant, is because I also was working I was on the radio, I was working in the clubs in LA, I was this, I was that. So I knew all the rappers that wanted to come to the studios, and these were my friends. And so again, I added value in other spaces and places that weren't traditionally what that role was supposed to consist of. That I think is why I got hired and continue to succeed in the spaces and places that I choose to be in. So yeah, just be yourself, y'all, for real, and know what you're talking about. Don't be over here lying on your resume, because I'm gonna ask you the questions.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think it's important that we lead with our personalities and our passions. But Jay, you were talking about credits earlier, and ultimately, this panel is about making money from being a producer and engineer. So someone who is really green and entering this business, it's cutthroat, it's lions and tigers and all the animals in the jungle. How does one ensure that they are being compensated for their work, whether they are contributing as a producer, as an engineer? Talk us through those logistics there.
Okay, well, first off, let me get into a phrase that I've used frequently. It's called cash or credit. Now, if you aren't getting a cash for working on something, you need to at least be getting a good credit. The problem is a lot of people like try to go to school, or they're the man in their neighborhood, and they're like, hey, anybody I work with now, I charge this much. This is what I want to get paid. But you're only as good as your last placement, in a sense, so that's why, it's important to make sure you're in the studios. It's important to make sure you're putting in the necessary hours and time to build your name up, to get the credits you need, to make sure you're in the rooms, you're networking, even if you're being actively, even if you're purchasing placements, to make sure that, not as far as placements, but let's say if you're putting records together on your own, buying features and you're putting records together. That's one thing. But I used to do anything from paying for the studio time to helping artists put together their whole album. And engineers don't even get a percentage of the song. I just would get songs in exchange, or they would shout me out in their records. And I built my name up before I started charging. But once I had a certain name, I was firm with what I charged. And you have to also do your homework and learn about, what people are actually getting paid. Because as an engineer, when I first started getting paid by labels, I was like, oh, that's too much, or I didn't know what to charge. I didn't even know the day rate was. I didn't know that per diem was included sometimes. So I actually have a company that I'm a part of. It's called Track It Services. But what they pretty much do is they represent me as an engineer, and they make sure that they do the talking for me between me and the labels, and they make sure I'm signed up for the right things. And a lot of times the label tries to hit me with like a net 30 or net 60, and I'm able to get paid immediately. But if you don't know about track it, having a manager or having someone to help you and be an in between you and this artist or label, so that you don't have to be the bearer of bad news all the time, helps when it's time to collect your coin. And I suggest getting on that earlier than later. You know, you don't want to be so tied in with an artist and look up 7 months and you haven't been paid and they blow up and you think they're going to pay you, because 9 times out of 10, that's not how it works. Make sure your paperwork is tight. Make sure you have a clear understanding of what's going in. Try not to press the situation, but have a good idea of when to start getting your things in order, because people aren't going to do that for you.
Yeah, Minji and Whitney, like at an education level, how much financial talk do you give, your students?
Minj, you want to go first? Because I'm long-winded, sister.
Yeah, I'll hop in here. Yeah, I mean, with interns, we do talk about it's because freelancing in the audio industry is a huge part of engineering and production if you're working in those spaces. So we talk about building like a freelance toolkit, how to protect yourself, and a lot of it is what Jay Rich is saying, like making sure your paperwork is tight, making sure you have things down in writing and you're having these types of conversations, and making sure that it's fair based on the amount of work that you've done and the rate between you and your client, whether that's a project rate, whether that's an hourly rate, whether that's a day rate, making sure that's all talked about and like you have an invoice for them so that everything's super clear. Because having it clear upfront is way better than getting down to the end of the project and having these kind of misaligned expectations. So I think having some sort of like financial literacy and fluency and being able to talk about that stuff is an important skill for people to develop. So we do talk about it. And then in terms of starting out in the industry, we also talk about just trying out a lot of different things. I think a lot of people in the industry start by doing a lot of different jobs, whether that's like working in AV to like really get some basic technical skills up while you're working on production at home and building those skills, or working in live sound, doing a lot of different things in the music industry. I liked what Whitney was saying, like she did so many things in the sphere, and like that helps build you up because it also builds your network and your connections. So I encourage people to try a bunch of different jobs while they're building up their engineering and production skills as well.
Yes. As the partnerships and again, I'm interfacing with our corporate and philanthropic partners all the time. For myself, making sure that we do workshops that specifically specialize in having those conversations. So copyright.gov, making sure that all of your paperwork is together. Bank of America, we've done, workshops and things like that for them to set up bank accounts. Again, we work with minors as well. So there's like Coogan accounts and like all these different rules and regulations and how things work when it comes to that too. So even finding stuff for parents, because again, the one thing that we see at Girls Make Beats is a lot of the parents now have this super talented, ambitious child, but they're like trying to protect them so they don't, sign some crazy deal or get, taken advantage of when it comes to their creative, IP or whatnot. And then I'm like, well, I'm not a manager, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that. So again, knowing a little bit about a lot, if you will, to be able to just direct them in a certain space. And again, we're like James said, he was up looking at, what decibels and all that. I be doing the same thing with other weird stuff too. So it's like, we have, what is it, YouTube University? Y'all, they didn't have it back in my day. I'm just gonna say, I know I look 28, but listen, they didn't have YouTube University back in our days. So utilize the tools that are free at your fingertips, especially when it comes to the new technology. I don't even think we talked about like AIs and this and that, the way that stuff is really going to be changing when it comes to our industry, make sure you're on top of that so you always have a job. Like, that's the thing. And the one thing that I always strive to remember, for myself included, is never stop learning, and don't ever think that you're at this point in your career that you're too good to do anything. If somebody came up to me and asked, can you lift these speakers up and clean up under them, I would do that, because we got to get it done. And if it's going to help the session, it's going to be great. So that's it.
That's a great way to wrap up. We are literally a minute from ending this conversation. And, I'd like to put in my own comment here. I think we all, we all go through dry spells in this industry, especially as a working producer and engineer. And I think the most important thing is to build a brand, right? If your brand is strong, then you've always got something to keep the wheels turning. Social media is a great tool. Jay Rich, you do an amazing job of that, building your brand as Jay Rich. And I think that's someone to model yourself on. James, you too, of course, not leaving anyone out here. But being entrepreneurs is super important. So thank you for everyone who's joined us, and good luck to everyone. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Whitney.
Happy birthday, Whitney!
Yeah.
That was a wonderful conversation. I want to thank our talented and brilliant panelists and moderator once again. Everyone stay where you are. Well, you have 15 minutes to go stretch, use a bathroom, but right back at the stage, we will have our artist fireside chat with Chelsea Cutler and the closing of All Access Fest. It's been a great day, and I'm excited for our next conversation.